Hi, Eric. How are you?
Good. How are you,
I'm well.
Justin?
Very well, thank you. Um, let's jump into who you are and what you do.
My name is Erik Owens. I am the president of the American Distilling Institute. We are a professional association of craft distillers. And yeah,
Okay. Craft. It's such an interesting word. Um, it really wasn't a thing until the 80s during the craft beer movement when some of the laws changed there, and then
uh-huh.
you get to the late 90s, early 2000s, and you start to see craft spirits. So let's talk a little bit about those early days of craft and how that kind of came about.
I guess you were asking me about the early days of ADI. So ADI was founded in 2003, 2004 by Bill Owens, my father. And he has a long history of entrepreneurship. He started one of the first microbreweries in California, had a previous career as a photographer, took some pretty famous pictures. But yeah, so with the craft beer in 1982, 83, he founded Buffalo Bills in Hayward, California. Yeah, by the time I was, I don't know if this is legal now. Well, it's not legal now, but even then, I was in high school brewing beer at Buffalo Bills. And yeah, so he was there at the beginning of the beer boom. He used to hang out with uh, I'm blanking on his name, Samuel Adams, but Charlie Papazian, a lot of the early craft beer pioneers. And he started Buffalo Bills. He started Beer the magazine. He started American Brewer magazine as well, and started two or three other breweries. But eventually sold them all off, and he was just sort of looking for the next thing to do around 2002, 2003. So he took a road trip across the country and went looking for craft distilleries. And he came back and founded ADI, and then in 2004 organized the first craft distilling conference at St. George in Alameda. So that was 18 years ago. And yeah, so that first meeting had approximately 60 people show up. The entire industry was maybe about 80 distilleries at that time. And so it was really him and one or two other part-time employees running ADI until about 2010. I think 2010 is a big inflection point where I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's maybe 200, maybe 400 distilleries tops in the US. And really the growth curve has just gone up. Every year, the conference grew exponentially. Every year, the number of distilleries grew exponentially.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I started my whiskey book, which is still in the works. 2020 hashtag get it published. Um, there were mostly large distillery operations. Mostly in Kentucky, mostly Tennessee. Um, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. But other than that, there were a couple of hundred distillery, craft distilleries, and they were small. They were people who had not garages, but sometimes they were in a garage in an industrial park, and that was the
Yeah.
distillery. So yeah, it has grown quite a bit um, over the years. So there's a very unique history on craft distilling, but now it's getting into late 2020. There's I want to say, and you're the expert on the numbers here, but I want to say probably close to around 2,100, 2,000 ish, distilleries in the works.
Yeah, I would say that number is probably pretty correct. Around my number last time I checked in February was just under 2,000. It's it's hard to know the number exactly. I mean, you basically have to look up every DSP, look at their website, Google them, and try to find them. And even once you do that, it's how do you really discern somebody who's a rectifier versus a distillery? You have to have firsthand information. But, you know, in general, I do try to go through and ask those questions. And you know, one of the tricks I've been told is like look on the website and look on their Facebook and see if there's pictures of stills. Distillers love to show off all that shiny hardware, and so if they're not doing it, there's probably a reason for it. But yeah, I mean, that TTB list is what, 3,200 right now. So yeah, 2,000, 2,100. So the number should be somewhere around in there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the situation that we're in now. It's very difficult for distilleries to operate under these. You know, it's difficult for everybody to operate under the national condition, but specific to distilleries, I received a sample the other day for the book, and they included a hand sanitizer, which I thought was really cool. And I know, I'm sure you can speak to how many distilleries are actually pumping out, you know, and how much sanitizer they're pumping out. This core shift, and I'm curious, what is it going to take? What do we as an industry need to do to kind of get back on track and make it so that, you know, most of these distilleries can still function when we get back to, I don't want to say life is normal, but, you know, some sort of normalcy.
Yeah, my previous career was in biotech and pharma, and it was definitely interesting for me to see the hand sanitizer thing take off. And then, you know, everybody's like, hey, what about the FDA? We got to follow their regulations as well. Yeah. And, you know, you look at the regulations and what does a clean business mean, clean room mean to one person versus another one? It's very different. But, you know, distilleries in the United States is such a patchwork of laws and regulations from state to county to city to neighborhood, right? And it's going through this, I've really seen that you need multiple sources of revenue. You need to be able to sell cocktails from your tasting room. You need to be able to sell bottles directly from your distillery. So as part of my keynote this year, we put out basically a tasting room bill of rights, what we would like to see for every distillery in the US to have the same rules and regulations as this, as a way to provide multiple sources of revenue. So when one source of revenue dries up, there's other things to fall back on. And the hand sanitizer was I think, lucky at first, or it's the distilleries were set up in order to be able to utilize that. And there was a mad dash in the beginning, but even in the beginning, I had people calling me and they're, hey, we need train loads of ethanol, right? And so businesses jumped into that space as well to really start cranking out hand sanitizer. And I think as it goes on, smaller distilleries will stop making sanitizer because they don't really have sales to support it, and other ones that are making sanitizer and making it efficiently and large scale will keep that as a viable source of revenue. But so going back to the basic tasting room bill of rights, the things that we in the last year, we just sort of sat down and said, hey, what does everybody need? And so number one thing would be no restriction on distillery ownership. You know, if you own a winery, a brewery, whatever, you should be able to own a distillery in conjunction with that. Number two would be the ability to purchase farmers markets permits for holiday, you know, the holiday market, being able to set up a booth and sell. Or just even being able to go down to your local farmers market on Saturday afternoon, you know, Number three would be the sale by the bottle, no limit on the number of bottles. If you want to show up to the distillery, you want to buy one bottle, you want to buy a pallet, knock yourself out. Number four would be tasting room licenses for beer, wine, and spirits. I was in Texas 9 months ago, and all the tasting rooms there had taps on the walls and had been purchasing brewing equipment. So they were setting up little nano breweries to make beer and sell it on premises. There's the last two then are tasting room, sale by the glass, no limit beyond responsible consumption. And the last thing would be open hours, 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to midnight. And yeah, I think that's really, it's maybe the final thought here is really looking for parity with beer and wine. We're really not asking for anything more than any other business has, and we want the same rights as beer and wine have.
Okay. I don't see that as super unreasonable. I mean, after all, I do consider wine, beer, and spirits in a larger category of hospitality.
Yeah.
You talk about these, these tasting rooms. It's almost like a restaurant or a hospitality suite where you go in and there is a customer interaction. There's something for sale. There's there's an exchange of goods and services, but there's also that hospitality component where you have to be polite. I mean, there's things where you're customer facing, you're consumer facing, so you have to have a staff that's a hospitality staff. So
Yeah.
I think parity would be is a great goal.
Yeah. And maybe if I could add two onto there, it's maybe it goes without saying FET, like I believe FET is definitely the most important thing moving forward, the tax increases. I sort of left it off of that list because it's been working on for years. It's its own kind of beast. And there's another thing in there, which is direct to consumer. It's its own kind of beast as well. And we could talk for hours on both of those issues as well. But really, yeah, the main thing that we look at and we want to strive for is parity, so that these businesses, which are local manufacturing businesses, which are providing jobs, can have a foundation to build their businesses and grow.
Yeah. And to your point, direct to consumer or DTC, some say that it's a divergent business model. That to have the distillery, to have the opportunity to get in front of the customer and sell and and produce is a different business model than designing an entire either club or package the way wineries have wine clubs. They have their monthly shipments or their quarterly shipments, or people can go online at the distiller at the winery and just order cases. That's its own it's its own beast, and it's a great revenue stream, but it also requires other compliance, and it requires other staff, and it requires other labor and packaging, and suddenly you have to think about how am I going to get. So I guess my point for that rant is, yes, I would like to see that level of parity as well. It's very frustrating not being able to. I can go on and I can buy $1,000 bottle of wine, I can buy a $10 bottle of wine. And there's multiple websites outside of just the winery that I could do it. If I want a whiskey or a gin, that's something that's really interesting that I just can't find anywhere, I have to figure it out. I mean, this is, social media has, many ways. Someone reached out to me the other day asking about how would I move rare whiskeys in a secondhand group. I belong to some of them, but I don't actually, I take that back. I know of secondhand groups on social media. I don't actually belong to any of them. But because that's not my jam. But it's interesting how that has become a way to move specifically, high-end whiskey. So it's needed. The parity is needed.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's now 2,000 businesses, 2,000 distilleries in America. I'd love to be able to go on the internet and order some of them and get them shipped, but it's just not possible. So
Yeah. So I just want. Sure. So one of the primary things that the American Distilling Institute does is they have this really great. I shouldn't have to tell you this. You know this, but they have this really great judging every year
yes.
of hundreds of spirits. So let's talk a little bit about that and what that's going to look like in February, probably.
It's yeah. Number one, it is a great judging. It's this year we're claiming to be the largest RTD judging in the world. We had 44 entries in the RTD category. Our judges judge in multiple competitions, and from what we've heard, that is the largest RTD competition in the world, and would be the largest craft RTD competition in the world for sure. But yeah, we talk in our staff meeting every week. We talk about the judging and what needs to happen, but the rules and regulations around it are everything's changed. We sort of thought everything might die down a little bit right now, but everything's sort of firing back up. And yeah, how can we run a judging with 40 people in the same room? You probably can't do that. But even so IWSC just ran a competition, and some of the things they're doing in the UK is you have to have everybody 6 feet apart, but you can actually have people within 3 feet if their backs are to each other, the opposite direction. So we can probably figure out things for the judges, but our biggest concern would actually be the stewards, because the stewards are packed in this room with thousands of bottles in it, and we need to figure out ways to do that. We still have until February to get there, but yeah, we're definitely hopeful that we can figure that out and get us there. And there's always the hope for a vaccine by then, before then, not looking too likely currently, but yeah. And the judging is its own magical little journey. It's this own group of people that come together. These are people that have relationships for 10, 15, 20 years, and this is their professional job. They get together and sample through 50 whiskeys or 50 gins in a day, which to the average layman just seems sort of insane. And like, how would you even do that? There are techniques, there are things, and you have to pace yourself and drink lots of water. But even just to go through that many samples is mind-boggling, even to me still. It's yeah. And yeah, so the judging is, as you're one of our stewards and have been for years, is there's its own little group amongst the stewards as well. And those are people who also are shaping and crafting what the judges get. So they go through, they sample everything, they flight everything, and make sure that everything's presented in a way that you're not going from high proof to low proof or super peaty to a non-peated whiskey. And yeah, it's such an honor to be part of it. And maybe the last thing is this year we actually were through Total Wine got they it was supposed to happen at the conference this year, which of course got delayed, but Total Wine took a meeting with everyone who wanted one from the best in class winners. So there's about 20 people that get the best in whiskey, the best in brandy, and they all got meetings with Total Wine to talk about distribution. And so, I mean, I think that's a big movement forward. And yeah, we'll keep working on things like that to give value to those judging winners. And it's one of the other really big values of the judging, I think, too, is just that you have these world-class judges, and you're getting written feedback from those judges on your spirit. It's all blind tasting, so they don't know who you are or who the spirit, like who the producer is, what spirit's being produced, but they're going to give their open and honest feedback. One of the changes we did last year is we used to do it with actually a pencil and paper. And, after 2 days of sampling over 100 spirits, it's, people's handwriting isn't always the best. But last year we switched over to digital and gave everybody laptops. And that really seemed to be a big improvement, because it's much easier at the end of the day. We all type all the time, right? So it's much easier form of communication.
Yeah. And that was honestly, the results were a lot easier to understand. So yeah. Well, Erik, thank you so much for coming on. The registration's already open, isn't it, for this year?
Yes, registration's already open.
Yeah.
You have a little while. Registration will close, I believe, January, the first or second week of January. So yeah, we're just trying to get all our ducks in a row and get it opened up now.
Excellent. And all of those links are below us on the in the YouTube format, and feel free to click on those links to ADI and to the judging. Erik, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and looking forward to toasting with a glass and a cigar with you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.